The Zarnith ship hovered like a shadow above Earth's surface, blocking the sun over the ruins of what used to be a great city. Buildings were broken, cars were crushed, and streets were quiet except for the low hum of the alien engines. The invasion was fast, cold, and final. Humans fought with everything they had. But their weapons were useless against the energy shields of the Zarnith. Within 2 weeks, Earth had fallen. Most of the survivors were taken into custody, separated, studied, and sometimes sent to distant planets for work. A few were taken for something more special. One of those was a man named Tom. He was not a soldier. He wasn't a scientist or leader. He was just a mechanic from a small town who had lost everything: his home, his family, his world. But when the soldiers came to capture him, Tom didn't cry or beg. He just looked at them, then calmly stepped forward and said, "Let's get this over with." Inside the Zarnith ship, he was brought to a tall silver chamber filled with glowing panels. The air smelled clean but strange, and everything made soft clicking or buzzing sounds. At the center stood General Virel, a high-ranking officer of the Zarnith Empire. Virel was not like the others. While most Zarnith had dull gray skin, hers had a pale violet hue. Her sharp blue eyes showed no emotion, and her voice was cold and clear. She stared at Tom as if he were a puzzle. "You are a human male," she said. Tom raised an eyebrow. "That's what I've been told." "You show no signs of fear," she continued, narrowing her eyes. "Why aren't you afraid?" Tom looked around. Alien guards were everywhere. Strange weapons were pointed at him. He was alone in the heart of the enemy's warship, and yet he smiled. "Because fear means you've already won," he said simply. "And I'm not ready to lose." Virel didn't speak right away. She was expecting crying, shouting, maybe even threats. Instead, she got quiet courage. It surprised her more than any weapon would have. Virel ordered that Tom be taken to a special observation chamber. It was a round room with smooth metal walls and no windows. Lights followed him wherever he moved. Food appeared through a slot in the wall. Every move he made was recorded. The Zarnith believed humans were weak and emotional. But Virel had a feeling this one was different. Each day, she watched him through the cameras. He talked to himself sometimes, but not out of fear. He stretched, walked in circles, even did push-ups. Once, he caught a small maintenance droid that was rolling across the floor and fixed its broken wheel. The machine beeped happily and followed him like a pet afterward. Virel watched with interest. "He adapts," she said to her assistant, quickly. Her assistant nodded but looked nervous. "Shall we begin the stress tests?" "Yes," she replied, "but start slow. I want to understand how he thinks." Tom wasn't sure what they were planning, but he had a feeling this wasn't just about studying his body. The aliens were watching his mind, his choices. He decided he wouldn't give them what they wanted. The next day, the lights in his room flickered. Loud sounds of war gunfire, screaming, alarms played through hidden speakers. But Tom didn't panic. He sat down, closed his eyes, and took a deep breath. "Nice try," he whispered to himself, "but I know you're faking it." Later, the food stopped coming. Then the lights dimmed. Still, he waited patiently. On the third day, food appeared again, and he smiled as he ate. "You're just testing limits, huh?" Virel watched all of this with growing confusion. She had broken stronger beings than him with less effort. But this human showed no fear, no anger, no sadness. She went to visit him again. Tom stood as the door slid open. He looked tired but calm. "Back to ask again?" he said with a slight smile. Virel stepped forward. "You should be afraid. You are alone, powerless, surrounded by enemies." Tom nodded. "That's true. Then why?" she demanded. "Why aren't you afraid?" Tom met her eyes, calm and steady. "Because fear is what you want from me, and I won't give you what you want." Her jaw tightened. "That's foolish." "No," he said. It's human." For a moment, there was silence in the room. The two stared at each other, an unarmed human and a general of the galaxy's most feared empire. Then, without warning, Virel turned and left the chamber. She didn't speak to her guards. She didn't give orders, she just walked, thinking. Thinking about this strange man who smiled without reason, who fixed a robot, who stayed calm while his world fell apart, who refused to fear her in her private quarters that night. She looked out the window of her ship. Stars stretched out in every direction. Planets below glowed faintly. And far away, Earth slowly rotated in silence. "He should be broken," she whispered to herself. "But he isn't." She remembered his words again. "Fear means you've already won, and I'm not ready to lose." For the first time in many years, General Virel didn't feel powerful. She felt curious. Tom woke up to the soft buzzing sound of machines. The lights above him were already on, and the same clean, cold air filled the room. He had no clock, no window, and no way to tell how long he had been inside this alien ship. But somehow he felt calm. He sat up on the small bed in the center of the room. The walls were smooth and round, made of glowing metal. The room had no sharp corners, no furniture, and no privacy. Only a food slot in the wall and a blinking blue light in the ceiling reminded him he was being watched. Tom stretched his arms and stood up. Another day of silence, he thought. Another day of games. He walked in circles around the room, then did a few push-ups, just like yesterday. It wasn't much, but it kept his body and mind active. If the aliens were watching him, and he knew they were, he wanted them to see that he wouldn't give up. In a dark control room high above, General Virel stood in front of a large screen. Tom's every move was being shown from different camera angles. Her face remained still, but her eyes followed him closely. "He is adapting faster than expected," said her assistant Zorik, standing nearby. "No panic. No emotional breakdown. No fear. He is not a typical human," Virel said quietly. Zorik hesitated. "Should we begin stronger psychological pressure?" Virel didn't answer right away. She folded her arms and watched as Tom sat down in the center of the room and began talking to the little repair droid again. The droid, a round silver ball with thin legs, had rolled into his chamber 2 days ago by accident. Its leg was bent, and it couldn't move properly. Tom had picked it up, studied the joint, and used a small pin from his own shirt to fix it. Now, the droid returned every day, beeping happily whenever it saw him. It wasn't supposed to do that, but no one stopped. If Virel wanted to see what would happen. "Look at that," Tom said to the droid, tapping the wall gently. "Same food again. You'd think with all this technology, they'd give me a menu." The droid blinked and gave a soft chirp like laughter. "You get it," Tom smiled. Virel turned away from the screen. No harsh methods yet. "I want to learn what keeps him stable. We observe longer." "But General, that's an order," she said firmly. Zorik bowed and stepped back. Virel remained still, thinking. The Empire had trained her to break the minds of enemies. Fear was a tool, simple, strong, and effective. But this human was immune, and that made him dangerous. That evening, Tom was served warm liquid and a hard square of something that tasted like dry bread. He didn't complain. He ate slowly, sitting on the floor with the droid beside him. As he finished, he leaned back against the wall and looked up at the blue light above him. "I don't know if you understand English," he said to the camera, "but I know you're watching." He paused. "So let me save you some time. I'm not going to cry, scream, or beg. I've seen worse. I've lived through worse. You might have taken Earth, but you haven't taken me." There was silence. Then he smiled again. "Hope that helps your report." Virel was still watching. Zorik returned, holding a small tablet. "We finished the test recordings." His heart rate, brain activity, muscle movement, all within normal limits. No signs of emotional instability. "He speaks to the walls," Virel said quietly. Yes, Zorik nodded. But not like someone who's broken. It's more like someone talking to a crowd. Varel slowly turned toward him. He knows we're listening. Zorik looked unsure. Do you want him silenced? No, Varel said, narrowing her eyes. I want to hear what he says next. Later that night, the repair droid brought Tom a small piece of wire it had found. It placed it in his hand and CHIRPED. Tom chuckled. You're giving me gifts now? What do I do with this build? A spaceship? He held up the wire, studied it, then placed it in a corner of the room. Maybe one day. The droid beeped and sat beside him again. The next morning, the room changed. The lights were brighter, the floor was warmer, and a soft humming noise filled the air. It felt like something big was moving above the chamber. Tom noticed all of it. He stood up and listened. Something's coming, he whispered. Then, without warning, the wall opened and General Virel stepped inside. She stood tall and straight, her silver uniform shining under the lights. Her long fingers were folded behind her back. The guards stood outside, not entering. Tom looked up, calm as always. Decided to visit again? Virel didn't reply at first. She took 3 steps closer. You continue to resist fear. Even here, even now, Tom nodded. Yeah, funny how that works. She studied his face. You are unarmed, alone, surrounded by an empire that destroyed your world. And still, you smile. I smile, Tom said, because if I stop smiling, I'll start breaking, and I don't want to break. Her voice became lower. You think hope is enough to survive us? I think it's the only thing that ever has. There was a long silence. Virel stared at him. The quiet confidence in his voice, the calm in his eyes, it made no sense. It went against everything. She believed. Then she asked again, one more time. Why aren't you afraid? Tom looked at her without blinking. Because fear is something you feed on. And I won't be your meal. For the second time, Virel had no words. She turned, walked out, and the wall closed behind her. Back in the control room, she stood silently as Zorik waited for her orders. General? He asked. Virel whispered, almost to herself. He is. Not afraid, because he still believes in something. Something I forgot long ago. Tom sat quietly in the center of his glowing cell, eyes half closed. The small repair droid rested beside him, softly blinking. Though days passed with no windows or clocks, Tom's inner rhythm kept him grounded. Each hour, each breath, each thought became part of his quiet battle. This was not a prison made of steel and chains. This was a prison of silence, of slow pressure, of waiting. But Tom had already decided he would not break. General Virel stood in the observation room again, arms crossed, staring at the screen. She had seen warriors cry. She had seen entire civilizations bend after one harsh interrogation. But this one man remained calm, as if he still carried Earth's spirit inside him. Virel's second in command. Zorik walked in holding a data pad. The human remains physically stable, he reported. Sleep pattern regular, heart rate balanced. No violent outbursts. He even fixed the broken speaker in his room using a food tray screw. He builds in captivity? Virel asked without emotion. Zorik nodded. Yes, also he talks to the droid every day. Has the droid been reprogrammed? No, General. It follows him by choice. Virel didn't reply, but deep inside, something stirred. Something she hadn't felt in years. Curiosity mixed with a strange respect. That day, she ordered the first real test. The lights in Tom's room dimmed. A sharp cold filled the air. Then, the walls shifted, displaying a perfect 3D image of earth-burning cities, broken monuments, ruined landscapes. A voice echoed through the chamber. You failed to protect your world. All is lost. Tom watched quietly. The images were powerful. He could almost hear the distant screams. see the smoke rising. He felt his heart tighten, but his face remained still. "Nice trick," he said softly. "But I know Earth. It never dies easy." Then the scene changed. His family appeared, his sister, his father, his old dog standing in front of a collapsed building. They looked at him, silent and still. Then they faded into dust. Tom closed his eyes for a moment. Pain hit him like a wave, but then he whispered, "They live in me now. You can't take that." Virel watched from behind the glass wall. The test should have broken him. The illusion was designed by Zarnath scientists to tear apart emotional defenses, but Tom had not screamed. He had not begged. Instead, he had remembered. "His emotions are strong," Zorik said, "but he uses them, not hides from them." Virel nodded slowly. "He transforms pain into strength." Zorik looked confused. "Should we raise the pressure?" Virel stared at the screen. "Not yet." The next day, the second test began. The droid that followed Tom was taken. Two tall Zarnath guards entered the room and pointed at the little machine. Tom stood up, stepping between them. "Easy," he said. "Where are you taking him?" The guards didn't answer. They grabbed the droid and began pulling it out. Tom didn't fight, but he shouted, "He did nothing wrong. He's just a helper." The door closed. Tom was alone again. He sat down heavily on the floor, staring at the spot where the droid had stood for hours. He said nothing, didn't move. Just sat. Then finally, he spoke aloud, not to anyone in particular. "You can take the droid. You can take everything, but I'll still be me." In the control room, Zorik tilted his head. That was the most effective test so far. He formed a bond with that machine. "He mourns without anger," Virel said. "He feels without losing." Control. What kind of creature does that? Zorik gave a small nod. Perhaps he is an outlier, one of a kind. But Virel wasn't sure. Her instincts whispered something different, that this human might not be special because he is alone, but because many more like him may exist. And that was a dangerous thought. On the fourth day, the third test began. This time, it wasn't a mental illusion or a lost. It was a choice. Tom woke to find his door open. A new corridor stretched before him, empty and silent. At the far end was a room. Inside, he saw a screen displaying coordinates, his hometown. Alongside it, a button labeled, "Erase memory core of Zarnath war maps. Will destroy enemy routes." Below that, another message read, "Warning. Pressing the button will release gas that ends your life instantly." Tom read it twice. He stood in silence. Then he chuckled to himself. Classic trade. He stepped forward and stared at the button. In the observation deck, alarms lit up. Zorik rushed in. He found the button. "Should we intervene?" "No," Virel said, raising her hand. "Let him choose." Tom looked at the button for a long time. He thought of the people back home, if any were left. He thought of the millions taken across space. If these maps were real, destroying them might delay the Empire's plans. It might give someone else a chance to fight back. He closed his eyes and whispered, "One life for a spark of hope." Then he turned around and did not press the button. He walked back to his room and sat down. Virel stepped into the test chamber moments later. Tom looked up at her. "You didn't press it," she said, arms behind her back. "No," he said quietly. "Why?" "Because." It was a lie. Her eyes narrowed. "Explain." "You wanted to test if I'd sacrifice myself. But I saw the reflection of your camera in the glass. This wasn't real. It was a setup. If you really wanted me dead, I'd already be gone." Virel said nothing. Tom leaned back. "You don't want to destroy me. You want to understand me." Virel looked at him in silence. Then she nodded once and left the room, back in the hallway. She paused. This human had passed every test not by fighting, but by thinking, feeling, and choosing wisely. For the first time she wondered, is he strong because he's human? Or are humans strong because they carry something we've forgotten? General Virel sat alone in her private chamber aboard the massive Zarnith flagship. Outside the wide window, stars drifted by like falling sparks. The universe had always felt quiet and cold to her, orderly controlled. But now that silence felt heavy. She replayed the last recording of Tom again. You don't want to destroy me. You want to understand me. His words echoed in her mind. For the first time in years, a prisoner had made her question her own methods. Not by threats, not by tricks, but by calm, by truth, and by something she could not fully explain. Elsewhere on the ship, whispers began to spread. Some Zarnith crew members had heard about the human who resisted fear. The technicians monitoring his cell talked about his cleverness. Some junior soldiers spoke quietly about the way he stayed calm, even when everything was taken from him. He doesn't act like a broken being, one said. He fixed a droid using scrap, another added. It follows him now like a friend. They say the general visits him often, whispered a third. Rumors grew. Some were amazed. Others were uneasy. The idea that one human could shake the beliefs of a mighty empire ... was unsettling. Zorik entered Virel's chamber the next morning. He stood straight, but his tone was tense. General, the High Command has reviewed your reports. They're confused why the human hasn't been processed yet. Virel didn't look up. Processed? You mean broken or destroyed? That is the standard protocol for resistant subjects. She stood and faced him. Have you ever spoken to him, Zorik? Zorik blinked. No, General. Then don't speak as if you understand him. Zorik hesitated. Respectfully, General. If others hear you speak this way, they may begin to question your loyalty. There was a pause. I'm questioning something, Virel said softly. But it's not loyalty. That day, Virel visited Tom again. He sat calmly in his room, as usual, legs crossed and eyes on the door as she entered. The moment she stepped inside, he nodded politely. You look tired, he said. Virel raised an eyebrow. You study me. Now? Tom smiled lightly. You've been studying me since day one. Fair's fair. She stepped closer. Some on this ship believe you're dangerous. I'm unarmed and locked in a glowing room. Dangerous how? Virel tilted her head. Because you make people think. Tom shrugged. Thinking's not a crime. In this empire, she said quietly, it might as well be. There was a moment of silence between them. Then Tom leaned forward slightly. Why are you still talking to me, Virel? I'm not a threat to your empire, unless you're afraid of my ideas. Virel's jaw tightened. I fear nothing, really? Tom asked. Then why am I still alive? She had no answer. Back in the command hall, a higher-ranking Zarnith official named Commander Rinner arrived. He was older, colder, and known for crushing resistance. On 3 planets without hesitation, he met with Zorik in private. I've read the reports, Rinner said. This human's survival is a mistake. Zorik tried to defend the general's choice. She seeks to understand the subject. There may be. There is no need to understand prey, Rinner interrupted. If she cannot finish the task, I will. Virel was summoned to the war chamber that evening. Rinner stood beside the central table, sharp-eyed and still. Human must be terminated, he said bluntly. At sunrise. Virel kept her face calm. He has offered no violence. He speaks with reason. He speaks against us, Rinner snapped. He spreads thoughts we cannot control. Thoughts that are already echoing through the lower crew. He's one man. That's all it takes to start a fire, Rinner growled. This is not about him. It's about what he represents. Virel didn't speak. She stood there, cold inside, knowing that logic wouldn't change his mind. Late that night, Virel walked down to the chamber again. The guards turned away. Sensing her mood, she stepped inside Tom's cell for what might be the last time Tom looked up. He could tell something was different. Let me guess. he said softly. I've been scheduled for deletion. Virel didn't answer. He stood. Slowly. So this is goodbye. She looked at him, truly looked. Not as a subject, not as a prisoner, but as a man who had refused to become less than himself. I can stop this, she said at last, her voice low. But only if I declare you useful. To the Empire. Useful how? Tom asked. Information, tactics, culture, anything they can study. Tom shook his head. So to live, I'd have to lie. Pretend to be a tool. Yes, he smiled sadly. Then I guess I've already made my choice. Virel stepped forward. Why won't you just surrender? Tom's eyes softened. Because if I stop being who I am just to survive, then I'm not really living. There was silence. She wanted to say something, anything, but no words came. Instead, she reached into her belt and handed him something small. It was the little droid. Repaired. Tom single quotes, his eyes widened slightly. I had it fixed, she said quietly. It kept returning to your door. The guards couldn't stop it. Tom bent down and picked it up. Thanks for bringing him back. The droid beeped, softly and warmly. Later, as Virel stood on the deck watching the stars, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Conflict. She was loyal to the Empire. But now, she was also loyal to the truth. And the truth was this: the human had not changed, but she had. The stars outside the Zarnath warship sparkled like silent watchers in the darkness. Inside the ship, everything ran like a machine, cold, smooth, and in perfect order. But deep within, something had changed. General Virel stood in her private quarters, hands behind her back, staring out into the black sky. Her thoughts were loud, even if her face was still. She had followed every rule of the Empire since her youth. She was trained to conquer, trained to control. But after meeting the human named Tom, nothing felt simple anymore. He had no weapons, no power, no army. And yet, he made her question everything. Elsewhere on the ship, Tom sat on the floor of his cell with the small silver repair droid curled beside him. Its little legs tapped gently against the ground as it hummed softly, blinking its light. Tom patted the droid's round body. Glad to have you back, buddy. The door opened. Tom looked up. To his surprise, it wasn't a guard this time. It was Virel. She stepped in alone, her boots silent against the smooth metal floor. You keep visiting, Tom said with a quiet smile. You sure I'm not getting to you? Virel didn't smile, but her voice was softer than usual. I don't know what I feel anymore. Tom stood up. That's the first honest thing you've said to me. They stood across from each other, no bars, no chains, no weapons between them. Virel looked at him for a long moment. You refused the Empire's offer. You refused safety. You even refused to lie. Why? Tom didn't look away. Because truth matters, even when it's hard. She stepped closer. You could have lived. I'd rather live right than live long, he replied. Virel lowered her eyes. The Empire does not think that way. Tom tilted his head. And what? About you? She hesitated. I did. A long time ago. Virel walked slowly around the room, her fingers brushing against the metal walls. Before I became a commander, I believed in exploration. I wanted to understand new worlds, not control them. Tom listened quietly. But they changed me, she continued. Taught me fear is more useful than friendship. That control is stronger than trust. And do you still believe that? He asked. She looked at him again. You've made me doubt. Tom's voice was soft. Then maybe there's still hope for you. Suddenly, the lights in the room blinked red. An alarm echoed through the ship. Loud, clear, urgent. Virel tapped a device on her wrist and listened. Zorak's voice came through sharply. General, we have a situation. There's been a communication leak. Someone inside the ship has sent out a signal to Earth-resistant cells. Virel's eyes widened. Tom stepped back. I didn't do anything. I know, she said quickly. You don't have access to the ship's systems, Zorak's voice returned. Commander Rinner believes it was the human. He's on his way to execute him now. Varel's heart pounded, something she hadn't felt in years. No, she said. Tell Rinner to stand down. He won't listen, Zorak replied. He's already near the cell block. Varel turned to Tom. We have to move. Tom looked confused. Move where? You're not safe anymore, she said. Come with me. For a moment, Tom hesitated. Then he picked up the small droid and followed. They moved quickly through the empty hallways of the ship. Varel's cloak flowed behind her as she led Tom past guards, labs, and locked doors. No one dared question her. This doesn't make sense, Tom said as they ran. Why are you helping me? Varel glanced at him. Because I'm tired of doing what's easy. And you reminded me of what's right. As they neared the lower hangar, the alarm changed. Now it wasn't just a leak alert. It was something else. Security breach, the voice said. Multiple lower officers disobeying orders. Rebellion suspected. Tom stopped. Wait, rebellion? Varel turned. Some of my crew. They've been watching you too. You gave them something they haven't had in years. What? Belief. In the hangar, several young Zarnath officers stood beside a small transport ship. One of them, a female officer with sharp eyes, saluted Varel. We're ready. General. Tom looked around. This is your plan? No, she said. This is your impact. Suddenly, heavy footsteps echoed down the corridor. Commander Rinner stormed into the hangar, his tall form stiff with anger. Soldiers followed behind him, weapons raised. Varel stepped in front of Tom. Stand down. Commander, she ordered. You've lost your mind, Rinner growled. You protect a human over your own people? He reminded me what it means to have a choice. Rinner raised his hand. Then I choose to end this now. Before he could give the kill order, one of the younger soldiers turned and pointed his weapon at Rinner. Others followed. You taught us to obey, one of them said. But you never taught us to think. He did. Rinner's face twisted in rage. You dare turn against the Empire? We follow truth now, another soldier said. Not fear. In the silence that followed, Rinner realized he was outnumbered. He lowered his hand. This will not be forgotten, Varel nodded. Let it be remembered. Moments later, Tom stepped into the transport ship with Varel beside him. The little droid rolled in and beeped cheerfully. As the hangar doors opened. Stars filled the view once more. Tom turned to Varel. So what now? She looked ahead, her voice steady. Now we find others who still believe in freedom. Zarnath. Human doesn't matter. What matters is what we choose to become. The stars outside the ship burned quietly as the small Zarnath transport flew through deep space. Inside, a strange group of travelers sat together. Zarnath rebels. A single human and a little repair droid that buzzed softly as it moved between them. Tom leaned against the cool metal wall, arms crossed, eyes focused on the stars. It was strange how peaceful space looked from here after everything that had happened. But peace, he knew, was never free. Not here, not now. Across from him sat General Varel, no longer wearing her sharp silver uniform. She had removed the Zarnath symbol from her chest. Her hands were bare, her face calmer than before, but there was still a fire in her eyes. Tom glanced at her. So, we're rebels now. Varel nodded. It seems that way. You sure about this? She looked at him. I've never been more sure of anything. The transport ship moved toward a hidden moon base used long ago by scientists and scouts. It was small, empty, and off the Empire's main map, perfect for planning their next move. As they landed, a few of Varel's most trusted crew helped power up the old systems. Lights flickered on, doors unlocked, and silence gave way to quiet, humming machines. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. Tom walked through the old halls, touching the walls gently. Feels like a ghost station. It's more than that, said a young Zarnith named Nera, one of the rebels. It's a beginning. Later that day, the group gathered in the control room. A screen showed the map of nearby systems. Red zones marked areas controlled by the Zarnith Empire. Only a few places remained untouched old Earth colonies, abandoned research posts, and wild zones where no one ruled. Virel stood beside the map. We don't have weapons. We don't have armies. But we have knowledge, and we have him. She pointed toward Tom. He looked surprised. Me? You're living proof, she said. Proof that the Empire can't break every spirit, that fear has limits, and that humans your kind don't just surrender. Tom looked around the room. Zarnith rebels stared back at him. Hopeful, expecting. I'm not a soldier, he said. You don't need to be, Nera said. You've already lit the fire. In the days that followed, they began sending secret signals across space. Messages hidden inside old cargo routes and repair droid codes. Simple words. Simple ideas. You are not alone. The Empire fears thought. Hope lives. The messages spread like sparks in the dark. Across the galaxy, people who had nearly given up began to whisper again. Zarnith officers who had doubts felt courage grow. Captured humans on remote work planets passed the message from cell to cell. And the name Tom began to be known, not as a warrior, but as the man who wasn't afraid. One night, Tom sat outside the base under a clear dome, watching the stars. The little droid beeped softly beside him. Virel joined him. You don't sleep much, she said. Too much on my mind, Tom replied. You? The same. They sat quietly for a while. Then Tom spoke. Why did you really save me? She looked up at the stars. Because I saw something in your eyes. Something I had lost. What was that? She turned toward him. Belief in something better. The next day, a message came through. It was short and encrypted. A group of Zarnith workers had taken control of a mining station. They had locked out the Empire's guards and declared themselves free. They requested help. They're asking for guidance, Nera said. They heard our message. Tom stood slowly. Then we have to go. Virel nodded. Let's give them what they need. The transport flew fast through dangerous space. Patrols were everywhere. But with Virel's codes and Tom's knowledge of human systems, they made it through. Arrived near the mining station, a large rock covered in metal towers, glowing with red lights. Inside, over 50 Zarnith and human workers stood together, holding tools, not weapons. Their eyes lit up as the transport landed. Tom stepped out. No guards, no speech. Just quiet, honest faces looking at him. One of the workers, a tall man with scars, stepped forward. Are you him? He asked. The human who stood up to them? Tom looked around. I'm just a man who didn't give up. The worker smiled. That's exactly what we needed. For the next hours, Tom and Virel listened to their stories. The rebels had been planning to act for months, but never had hoped that others would join them. After hearing the secret messages, they realized they were not alone. Virel helped them organize, set defenses, share power. No leaders, just a shared goal. Freedom. As they prepared to leave, the tall worker shook Tom's hand. You gave us courage. Tom nodded. Now give it to others. Back aboard the ship, Virel stood beside him in the control room. You've done more in days than I did in years, she said. Tom shook his head. You chose to stand beside me. That's more than most. She looked at him. We started with nothing, but now everywhere we go, the spark spreads. Tom looked out the window. Then let's keep spreading it until the whole galaxy sees the light. In the darkness of space, a fire had started, not one of war, but of belief, of quiet resistance, of a future where fear would no longer rule. And at the center of that fire stood a man with no weapon in his hand, but with truth in his voice. The Empire had taken his world, but it could never take his will. The rebel base on the hidden moon was alive with quiet energy. Screens flickered with messages from across the galaxy. Soldiers and workers moved swiftly, preparing supplies, sending secret transmissions, and sharing whispered stories of hope. At the center of it all, Tom stood beside General Virel, watching the activity with a calm determination. "This is just the beginning," Virel said softly. Tom nodded. "We've lit the spark. Now we have to protect it." The Empire was not slow to react. Months of quiet rebellion had turned into small uprisings across many systems. The Zarnath fleet moved in force, attacking rebels and tightening control. But the rebels were ready. Using stolen ships, hidden bases, and secret codes, they stayed one step ahead. Tom and Virel worked tirelessly to organize defenses, teach strategy, and keep spirits high. Though he was just one man, Tom's courage became a symbol proof that fear was not the only answer. One evening, as the stars shone brightly outside the base, Tom sat with the little repair droid. The small machine chirped softly, rolling between his feet. Virel joined him quietly. "You know," Tom said, "when I was locked in that glowing cell, I never imagined this." Virel smiled faintly. "Neither did I," he looked at her. "Thank you for not giving up on me," she met his gaze. "Thank you for reminding me what it means to hope." But the fight was far from over. A new message arrived, encrypted and urgent. The Empire planned a massive strike on the rebel base, a final attempt to crush the spark. The rebels gathered in the war room, faces tense but ready. Virel stood tall. "We won't let them win." Tom looked around. "We fight not just for ourselves, but for everyone who believes in freedom." When the battle came, it was fierce. Ships flashed across the sky, energy beams lighting up the darkness. Explosions shook the moon. Rebels and Empire forces clashed in every corner. Tom moved through the chaos, helping wherever he could. He wasn't a soldier, but his courage inspired those around him. Virel led the defense, calm and sharp, directing ships and ground forces. Together, they held the line. After hours that felt like days, the Empire fleet finally retreated. The rebels cheered quietly, but they knew this was only the start of a long war. Tom looked up at the stars, his eyes shining. "We've won a battle," he said, "but the war for freedom continues." Virel placed a hand on his shoulder. "And we will fight it together." In the days that followed, messages of hope spread faster than ever. More systems declared their independence. More people found courage to stand against fear. Tom became more than a symbol. He became a leader in his own way. Not by force, but by example. He showed that even in the darkest times, humanity's greatest power was its will to keep moving forward. One quiet night, Virel and Tom stood together looking out at the stars. "Do you think Earth will ever be free again?" Tom asked softly. Virel smiled. "I believe it will. Because of you. Because of what you started." Tom nodded. "Then I'll keep fighting." "And I'll be with you," she said. The stars stretched endlessly before them, bright, full of possibility. A new dawn was rising, not just for Earth, but for every world that dreamed of freedom. And as long as people like Tom and Virel stood together, the spark of hope would never die.